When I bought the little white farmhouse at the edge of Cedar Hollow, people told me I was lucky. It's peaceful out there, the realtor had said, smiling as if she had personally handcrafted the breeze that swept across the open fields. Closest neighbor is a retired couple. Quiet.
Keep to themselves.
I should have paid attention to the way she emphasized keep to themselves. The house sat on 2.5 acres of flat land bordered by a weathered wooden fence that had probably stood there since the late 70s. It wasn't pretty, but it marked the boundary clearly. Beyond it lay another stretch of property, owned by the Hargroves, my nearest neighbors. The first week after I moved in, I barely saw them. A silver SUV would glide down their gravel driveway in the mornings, and in the evenings the porch light flicked on precisely at 7. Everything about their routine felt measured. Then on the 8th day, I noticed something wrong. I was standing near the east side of my property, holding a coffee mug and admiring what I planned to turn into a vegetable garden. The fence line ran straight until it didn't. Halfway down, the boards jogged inward at a strange angle, like someone had grabbed the fence and nudged it 6 feet toward my land. I blinked. That wasn't right. I had walked the perimeter with the realtor. The fence had been straight. I was sure of it. I set my mug down and paced it out. From the oak tree near the road to the corner post by the creek, I remembered counting roughly 200 steps. Now I reached the corner 6 paces early. 6 paces. 6 feet. Someone had moved my fence. I'm not a confrontational person. I prefer solving problems with polite words and calm logic. So that afternoon, I walked up the Hargroves' long gravel driveway and knocked on their door. Mrs. Hargrove answered. She was in her late 60s, hair pulled tight into a gray bun, eyes sharp and calculating.
Yes.
Hi, I said, offering my best neighborly smile. I'm Daniel. I moved in next door last week. I know. Her tone wasn't welcoming, but I pressed on. I think there might have been a mistake with the fence line between our properties. Her expression didn't change. What mistake? It looks like part of it's been shifted inward. About 6 feet. She gave a small, humorless laugh. That fence has been there for years. I understand, but I walked the property when I bought it. I'm certain it was straight. She stared at me for a long moment, then opened the door wider. Harold, she called inside. The new boy says the fence moved. Her husband appeared behind her, tall, thin, wearing suspenders over a plaid shirt. He didn't look surprised. Fence is where it's always been, he said flatly. I don't think so, I replied. Maybe we should check the property survey. Harold's eyes hardened. Survey says what it says.
Fence is fine.
I felt heat rise in my chest. Do you have a copy of the survey? Don't need one, he said. Been here 30 years. We know where our land ends. So do I said quietly. And I think that fence was moved. The door closed in my face. That night, I dug through the paperwork for my closing documents. There was a clean, certified survey map showing exact measurements. I took a flashlight and walked the perimeter again, comparing distances. The map didn't lie. 6 feet of my land, running nearly 100 yards, had vanished behind that crooked fence. 600 square feet. That's not a small error. That's deliberate. The next morning, I called a licensed surveyor and requested a boundary confirmation. It cost more than I wanted to spend, but I needed certainty. 3 days later, bright orange flags dotted my property line like warning beacons. And every single one of them stood 6 feet beyond the current fence. The surveyor, a calm man named Lewis, shook his head. Someone shifted it recently, he said. Posts are new. Concrete's still fresh under the soil. So, it was intentional. Oh, absolutely. I thanked him and watched as he drove away. The anger that settled in my stomach wasn't loud. It was cold, focused. They didn't think I'd notice. They didn't think I'd do anything. I walked over again, survey map in hand. Harold was in the yard this time, trimming hedges near the driveway. Morning. I called. He didn't look up. What do you want? I had the property surveyed. Silence. The fence is 6 feet inside my boundary. I need it moved back. He clipped another branch.
Snip. Snip.
That fence is fine. I have legal documentation. He straightened slowly and finally faced me. You're new here, he said. You don't understand how things work. How what works? We maintain that stretch of land. Always have. Previous owner didn't mind. That doesn't make it yours. He stepped closer. You planning to start a war over 6 feet? No, I said evenly. I'm planning to reclaim my property. His jaw tightened. Do what you think you need to do. I contacted a lawyer. The advice was simple. Send a formal notice demanding restoration of the original boundary within 30 days, or legal action would follow. The certified letter went out the next morning. And that's when things escalated. 2 days later, I came home from work to find tire tracks cutting across my yard. Deep grooves, tearing through the grass near the shifted fence. I installed security cameras that night. On the third night, at 2:17 a.m., the camera caught Harold standing near the fence with a shovel, adjusting one of the posts slightly inward. Just inches, but enough to show intent. I saved the footage. Day 28 arrived with no response. Day 30 came and went. The fence remained. Small-town courtrooms have a peculiar atmosphere. They feel less like halls of justice and more like community meeting spaces where grudges wear suits. The judge listened patiently as my lawyer presented the survey, the video footage, and the formal notice. Harold argued that the fence had been in that position for over a decade, implying adverse possession. But the fresh concrete and the video betrayed him. The judge ruled swiftly. The boundary shall be restored to the legally surveyed line within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in daily fines. Outside the courthouse, Harold glared at me. This isn't over, he muttered. I didn't respond. I thought the matter was settled. I was wrong. On the 12th day after the ruling, construction equipment rolled onto their property. Not toward the fence.
Toward their driveway.
I watched from my porch as workers tore up the gravel entrance that connected their home to the main road. At first, I assumed they were repaving. Then I noticed something strange. Their driveway, though mostly on their property, crossed 6 feet of land at the very edge. My land. The section they'd stolen. The section the fence had concealed. They weren't just moving the fence back. They were redesigning their entrance to avoid touching my property at all. And the new plan. It angled sharply, forcing their driveway to curve wide and cut through their own landscape garden. It was ugly, impractical, expensive, but it avoided my 6 feet entirely. I realized something. They hadn't wanted the land for space. They'd wanted it because their original driveway had been built slightly over the line decades ago. When I demanded the boundary be restored, they couldn't legally use that sliver anymore. So they had to rebuild. They moved my fence 6 feet. So construction lasted 3 weeks. During that time, the Hargroves had to park on the road and walk nearly 100 yards to their house. Rain turned the exposed soil into mud. Deliveries were missed. Tempers flared. Every time I stepped outside, I could feel their resentment. But I wasn't done. Once the fence was restored to its rightful line, I decided to build something along it. Not out of spite. Out of purpose. I hired contractors to install a tall privacy fence, 8 feet high, solid cedar. Perfectly legal. Within my property. Blocking their view of my yard entirely. They had enjoyed open sightlines across that stolen 6-foot strip for years. Morning coffee on their porch had likely included a panoramic glance over what they assumed was theirs.
Now.
All they saw was cedar. One evening, as the last fence panel was secured, Harold marched to the property line. You're enjoying this, aren't you?
Overkommelig.
I'm protecting my privacy. You've ruined our view. You moved my boundary. It was 6 feet. It was mine. We stood there, separated by the freshly installed fence. You cost us $30,000, he said. You tried to take my land. Silence stretched between us. Then, surprisingly, his shoulders sagged. We didn't think you'd fight it. I know. That was the problem. Months passed. Winter settled over Cedar Hollow, blanketing everything in white. One snowy morning, I noticed something unusual. Harold's new driveway, poorly angled and steep from the redesign, had iced over completely. Their SUV struggled halfway up before sliding backward.
Twice.
3 times. I watched from my window.
Part of me wanted to ignore it.
After everything, I owed them nothing. But something in me softened. I grabbed a shovel and a bag of salt and walked over. Harold looked stunned as I began spreading salt along the worst patches. "You don't have to do that," he muttered. "I know." Mrs. Hargrove stepped outside, wrapped in a heavy coat. "We were wrong," she said quietly. The words hung in the cold air. I kept shoveling. "You could have talked to me," I said, before moving it. She nodded. We panicked. The original driveway wasn't permitted properly. We thought if we extended the fence, no one would notice. But someone did. Yes. By the time I finished salting, the ice had begun to melt. Harold approached me slowly. "We're too old to keep fighting," he said. "Maybe we start over." I considered it. "Boundaries matter," I said. "But so do neighbors." He extended his hand. The cedar fence still stands. The driveway remains awkward and slightly inconvenient. But sometimes on quiet evenings, I hear laughter drifting over the boards. Last summer, Harold surprised me by building a small gate, on his side, entirely within his boundary, that opened toward the road near my mailbox. He knocked one afternoon and asked if I'd like some tomatoes from their garden. They grow them 6 feet farther from my land now, and somehow they taste better. In the end, the dispute was never really about 6 feet of soil.
It was about respect.
They moved my fence 6 feet, so I moved their entire entrance, not out of revenge, but because sometimes the only way to teach someone where the line stands is to redraw it in permanent ink.